Hello, Psychology of Learning students. Can you believe it is week 7? This week we'll be covering chapter 6, which I think is one of the easier chapters in the book, one of the less dense chapters. So I'm kind of glad that you're getting a little break. I know last week, chapter 5 is very dense with lots of information in it. So you kind of get a little bit of a break this week. All right, let's get to it. We're going to have two videos to cover the PowerPoint presentations. And by now, you know exactly how to get to these PowerPoints. You know where they are. Okay, I don't know how this ended up. Let's go up to the top. Sorry about this. Okay, so this is chapter 6, Reinforcement Beyond Habit is what it's called. And in this first video, it's going to be short. I'm going to give an overview of what the chapter is about. I'm going to talk about shaping behavior and chaining, forward chaining and backward chaining. Then in the second video, I'm going to talk about problem solving and creativity, superstitions, which is just fun to talk about. And one of my most favorite topics in the world, learned helplessness. And then Seligman's later work, learned optimism. Okay, so what is this chapter about? Well, we want to talk about operant. We're talking about operant conditioning or operant learning. That was chapter 5. We talked about positive and negative reinforcement. But operant learning is more than just learning and breaking habits. It's more than that. What else does reinforcement teach us about human behavior? Well, for a while, people were responding to Skinner by saying, well, reinforcement might work for certain behaviors. So there's a cute clip that I posted of The Big Bang Theory, if you like that TV show, where Sheldon uses positive reinforcement, candy, chocolate, to help get Leonard, his roommate's girlfriend, Penny, to act more the way that he wants her to act. And so you can see that there's behaviors in there. It's kind of a cute clip. Most of the information is in the first 4 minutes, so it won't take very much of your time. If you like that show, it's kind of cute. But people would say, okay, Skinner, so you might be able to get, like Leonard could get Penny to talk in a lower voice, to maybe not sit where in his seat, and this kind of thing. But what about when we're solving problems? What about new forms of behavior? What about creative acts? What about coming up with solutions that no one else has ever come up with, creating new information? How that behavior is just way too complicated for reinforcement, for operant conditioning to be creating it. The law of effect, Thorndike's law of effect, operant conditioning from Skinner, it can't, this is people talking to Skinner and Thorndike, it can't account for the human behaviors that are so complicated. But Skinner says, no, I think it can. And he identifies this thing that he calls shaping. Sometimes it's called successive approximation, but it's shaping. So let's talk about an example that he has. If you want to get a rat to do a particular behavior, but in order to reinforce the behavior, if it's a complicated behavior, the rat isn't going to just do it all of a sudden. You could sit there and wait for hours for the rat to do that complicated behavior. They're not going to do it right at the beginning. But what you could do is get the rat to reward or reinforce the rat every time the rat gets close to doing the beginning of the activity, and then more and more and more. So let's look at it. If lever pressing results in food falling into a tray, then the rate of lever pressing will typically increase, because the animal is learning, when I press this lever, I get food. And food is a primary reinforcer, especially if the animal is hungry. So pressing the lever, they get food, then they'll start to press the lever more. But what if the rat never presses the lever in the first place, and you're waiting and waiting and waiting for them to do it? They're never going to be able to get this behavior reinforced. What are you going to do? Well, you can use this successive approximation, or what we call shaping, to get the animal to do more and more what you want. So it's reinforcement of successive approximations of a desired behavior. and it can establish a behavior pretty quickly. So when you have time, oh, maybe this is going to play it now. But when you've got time, if I play these videos as part of this, it's hard for people sometimes with the bandwidth to be able to watch it. It makes it too wide. So on your own time, please go to this address, the HTTPS YouTube, just cut and paste it, or you can click on the PowerPoint slides on the little thing right here, and you'll be able to see how Skinner was able to use shaping or successive approximation to get this pigeon to circle around, to do a circle. And what, oh, it is going to do it here. If that happens, I think we're going to lose it. So the bandwidth will be too wide. So what happens is when the animal, like, let's say we're talking about the pressing the lever, if the rat just even looks at the lever, then food will come out. And then, so then that increases the likelihood of the animal just looking at the lever. Then you make it a little bit more difficult to get the positive reinforcement. Now, in order to get the reinforcement, the animal, the rat, not only has to look at the lever, but has to like take one step closer to the lever, and then the food shows up. And then soon after they seem to be doing that well, they have to get all the way to the lever. And then soon they have to pick up their paw toward the lever. And then eventually they press the lever, and now they only get the reinforcement, they only get the food if they actually press the lever. So it's a great way to explain, or it's a great way to shape someone's behavior, to get them to do more and more of what you would like them to do. Now, that works great if it's something that you're trying to consciously shape to get a behavior that you want, or maybe to remove a behavior that you don't want. But shaping can also occur naturally, maybe to some behaviors that you don't want. So the book talks about tantrums. It might be that, you know, you're tired. I know when my kids were young, and sometimes I'd have to go to the mall after a long day of work, and I'd pick up my daughter from the woman who was watching her, and I'd have to buy a birthday gift for someone. And so I'd take her to the mall, and I'm tired and I'm hungry, and she's tired and she's hungry. And as we get close to, in the mall, they used to have a toy store there. She'd be like, I want a Barbie, I want a Barbie, I want a Barbie. And, you know, when I wasn't tired and I was doing well, I'd be like, no, we're not getting that. You don't have enough, like a point system that we had, she didn't have enough to get that. But sometimes when I was really tired and hungry and she'd go, I want a Barbie, I'd be like, okay, let's just get a Barbie. Well, by doing that, I reinforced her having a little, I want a Barbie, I want a Barbie, I want a Barbie. I reinforced this very obnoxious behavior. Now, when I'm less tired, she might go, I want a Barbie, I want a Barbie, I want a Barbie. And I'm going, oh, you know, Patricia, stop, that's annoying, and wouldn't reinforce it. But then she might do something that's a little bit more exasperating, and I'm more exasperated, so I just give in and give it to her. Well, what I've reinforced now is that I've upped the ante. She now has to not just be annoying, but even more tantrum-like. And eventually you could see how it would be easy for a parent to end up reinforcing full-blown tantrums where the child is acting ridiculous, and the parent has no idea that they've actually shaped the child into that kind of behavior. It's why all of the parenting textbooks talk about over and over and over, consistency, consistency, consistency. It's just hard because we're human. So also shaping can explain new forms of behavior, because as the organism just does something new, because organisms are always moving in new ways, if they move in a new way and then something happens that's positive, or something's taken away that's positive, a negative thing is taken away, so they're left with a positive response, a positive environment, then they're going to be more likely to do that behavior again. And so when they do that, you could see how very easily their behavior could be shaped. And so organisms' behavior can be formed through this natural selection, through shaping. And now the way we've been talking about shaping, we've been talking about it as though there's one behavior and then the reinforcement. But a lot of behaviors are like really complex, and they're what we might call behavior series. So like cooking involves more than just one behavior. I have to write a list, go to the grocery store, come back from the well, and even in that, I have to drive my car, come back from the grocery store, unload the groceries, pull out the things that are on the recipe, find the recipe, pull out the things on the recipe, maybe chop something, turn things up. There's lots and lots of behaviors. So this is where Skinner talks about behavior chains or chaining. So with chaining, we're going to teach an organism how to do a whole bunch of behaviors in a sequence. And this sequence becomes really important. So your book's example is predators search for prey, stalk it, pursue it, kill it, and eat it. And oftentimes, that has to be done in a particular order. There's lots of behavior chains in your life. I think it's wise right now to stop the video and think of a behavior chain that you have. You can use cooking if you want. You might use something that's more relevant to you, especially if you don't cook very much. Like if you live in the dorm and you're going to the cafeteria to eat, then cooking isn't going to be the best behavior chain. So stop the video, give some thought, think about a behavior chain in your life. So remember, a behavior chain is just going to be a sequence of behaviors that you have to do in a row. At the very end is when you get your big reinforcement. Okay, and they have to be completed in a specific order. Okay, turn off the video once you come up with that. You can come back. Okay, so I hope you have an example in mind as we're talking about this. So we can teach an animal or a person to perform a behavior chain. Now there's two different ways we can do this. One is called, well, first we want to break down the task into each of the different components. Then we can either teach it through what we call forward chaining. So with forward chaining, you're going to reinforce first just the first behavior being done. Then you're going to reinforce the first behavior being followed by the second behavior. Then you're going to reinforce the first behavior being followed by the second behavior being followed by the third behavior. The animal or person has to do all three in order to get the reward at the end. Then you're going to have them do the 4 things before they get the reinforcement at the end. Then the 5 things, depending on how many things are on your chain. Okay. What's fascinating to me, however, is that backward chaining is actually more efficient. With backward chaining, let's say there's 5 behaviors you want the person to do before they get their reinforcement. With backward chaining, you teach them to do the 5th one first. So they're going to do the 5th behavior and get their reward, their reinforcement. After that's established, then you have them do the 4th thing followed by the 5th thing and they get the reinforcement. After you get that established, then they're going to do the 3rd thing, the 4th thing, and 5th thing, and then get the reinforcement. After that's known, then they have to do the 2nd, followed by the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, and then they get the reinforcement. And then finally, they have to do the 1st thing, followed by the 2nd, followed by the 3rd, followed by the 4th, followed by the 5th, then to get the reinforcement. Backward chaining seems to work better because there's more of a link between the reinforcement. You can see that reinforcement that they get at the end is the same reinforcement all the way through. So it tends to work better. This is just more specifics about it. So with forward chaining, the trainer begins by reinforcing the performance on the first link of the chain. And they do that till it's performed without hesitation. And then they have to do the first 2 behaviors or the 2 links. And then that gets reinforced before you have that done, and then 3, and so on and so on. Where with backward chains, first you do the last link with the reinforcer, then the second to last and the last with the reinforcer, and so on and so on. And your book talks about this experiment that was done by Cheney in 1978, where this rat would learn to climb up a ramp and then cross this drawbridge and walk across it, or climb this ladder and then walk across a tightrope, climb another ladder, walk through a tunnel, step into this elevator, and then press a lever and the elevator goes to the top, and then there was food at the top. And Cheney was able to train this rat to do it both through forward chaining and through backward chaining. And it was Chaining who realized that backward chaining was quicker to teach the rats. They seemed to learn that faster. So remember with chaining, each link in the chain is reinforced by the opportunity to perform the next step in the chain. Because when you do this next step, now I'm talking not like a Skinnerian, I'm talking more like a cognitive person. But the idea is that when you do one thing, then the next behavior is going to be available to you, and after that, you're going to end up getting your reinforcement. Okay. And so the last reinforcer in the chain is crucial. If that last reinforcement doesn't happen or stops happening, you're going to get extinction and the chain will go away. So you have to really have a great final reinforcer at the end. So for my cooking, the great reinforcer at the end is a nice meal that I enjoy. Now, if I start cooking and doing all this, going to the grocery store and pulling out a recipe and taking out items and chopping this and chopping that and cooking this and frying this and roasting that and putting it on a plate, and it's awful and it tastes really bad for a number of days in a row, this whole chaining thing of my enjoying cooking is probably going to not last very long, and we'll be ordering out much more than my cooking. So you can see that you need that reinforcer at the end. Okay, well, that is it for this video. I'm going to post a second video talking about problem solving, creativity, superstitions, and helplessness. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at maryd@cameron.edu or marydz@cameron.edu. Both email addresses will work.